Okay then. If you've elected for a customized engine from source code, then now's the time to get that engine safely tucked away into version control. I'll assume at this point then that you'll either have A, downloaded and installed the relevant Perforce software components, or B, you're not using Perforce and will translate what we discuss here and adjust it for your own version control software choice. Or C, you're not using version control at all, in which case you can gleefully skip to the next lecture. And I'm actually quite envious of you if that's the case. For those of you that are left, man, I don't mind telling you, this uploading process is a ball ache. Not because it's particularly difficult, it's just so brutally time consuming. But once done, it's done and we can all move forward. I have to say at the outset though, expect this to take a few hours, so keep a book handy, and tea, and biscuits. Now, we need to just quickly do something on the server before we get into the client. It's very rare for you to need to do work on a server, but we do need to do a bit of setup here. I wouldn't normally throw you into something so deep so quickly, but this really does need to be done. So head to a command prompt and I'll talk you through it. So set the P4 port first. If you're using a local server, then just set the port number. If you're using a central server somewhere, then set the fully qualified host address. And a big honking disclaimer here. If you are using a central server somewhere, then I hope you either know exactly what you're doing here, or you're doing this in concert with your Perforce administration personnel. No worries if the server is on your local machine though, can't do much harm there. Now set the P4 user to the user account we created earlier. Then you may have to set your password too if you have one. That would be the P4 passwd environment variable. Most of you won't have if you followed the installation instructions for a local Perforce server in the previous lecture. Now type P4 type map, and this is the important bit. This will open up Notepad or whatever text editor is your default, and it will be fairly blank. We need to enter some type mappings here. Mine are already entered, I already set this up beforehand. But don't worry, you don't need to type all this in by hand. There's a file called typemap.txt in the lecture resources. Open that up and paste the contents into the file already open. Save it, then close Notepad. The changes should then be saved to the server and the command prompt should confirm that. So what we did there was to qualify a whole bunch of files in the server to be writable. DLL, PDB and exe files also set to store just one copy, and exe files in particular also set to be always executable. Now the reason we do this is that coders will often compile exes and DLLs and don't want to be checking them in and out all the time. If a coder makes changes to the engine code, then they will take special responsibility for checking in any related DLLs and exes for those source code changes. This will update non-coders with the latest binaries, and coders too will also grab those binaries when they next synchronize to the depot. But with coders, when they next compile their code, the relevant DLLs and exes will be rebuilt anyway. So having them writable makes a lot of sense for avoiding tedium. But also having them set to only store one historical copy of the file saves a lot of disk space on your server, because your server normally stores all the historical copies of files between each change list that modified them. We just don't need this for DLLs and exes because they're rebuilt when source code changes anyway, should you want to go back in time and revert the changes made to the engine. That was some lengthy expo, eh? But having edited the type mappings, our file upload will now be a whole lot easier. If you were unable to do this for whatever reason, then you need to stop right now and seek further help to accomplish it, and only then continue. If you try to perform the remainder of the upload process without these type mappings in place, then although the upload will work, you will run into problems later. So get it right now from the start. Now let's load up the client by running p4v from Explorer and then log in. So first things first, let's adjust a few preferences to enable this client to be able to handle the sheer number of files we'll be uploading. It'll deal with them all behind the scenes regardless, but it just won't always show them all to us until we give it the go-ahead for such long file listings. So let's quickly head into the Edit menu and select Preferences. Click on Server Data. And let's just change the maximum number of files displayed on the change list to 100,000. And also the number of change list jobs, etc. to 0. And then hit OK. The next thing we need to do is to create ourselves a new workspace. We'll do this by heading into the View menu and then selecting Workspaces. Shift over to the right hand side of the app, ensuring the Workspaces tab is selected. Right click in the empty space there and choose New Workspace. What a workspace is like an interface between the Perforce depot and your development machine. Right here, they're likely to be one and the same machine, but don't let that confuse you. Normally in game development proper, your Perforce depot will be on a central server somewhere, and you're going to need your own local copy of it, or at least parts of it. A workspace then is a mapping between the files in a depot and your local copies on your client. You never work with depot files directly. You work with local copies which you can then modify and subsequently synchronize them back into the depot later by checking them in. So let's get our workspace set up here then. First, enter the name for it. I'm going to use rb.laptop, but use whatever you feel is appropriate. Then we need to locate the workspace root of the depot on your local machine. This will be the folder that we want to create inside of the depot. To keep things really simple for this course, what we're going to do here is simply add our Unreal Engine folder. So let's hit the Browse button for the workspace root and locate our Unreal Engine folder on our local machine. As it happens, mine is already there, but you might have to navigate a little bit. And done. So here we can see that our depot on the Perforce server is mapped to the root of the rb.laptop workspace, which in turn is mapped to the local folder we just selected. It's slightly confusing, but it becomes second nature after a while. Moving on a bit further then. Setting up your Perforce workspace in an effective manner is critical here. Sure, you need to learn a little arcane syntax, but it really does pay off. We need to switch our mapping view from tree to text view for this. There's a button on the right there to do just that. Now I'm going to quickly paste in some mappings from a previous project. Check out this witchcraft. Now you too can grab this from the lecture resources, the mappings.txt file, and paste it in yourself instead of painstakingly copying it over by hand. In this case, rb.laptop is the name of my workspace and depot is the name of my depot in Perforce. Obviously, you'll need to substitute these with your own values. Likely you'll just need to change the workspace name, rb.laptop, to the one you just entered at the top of the dialog. So, getting back to the mappings, what is this all about? Well, it's about tasking Perforce with filtering out some of the unnecessary garbage you might try to add into the depot, which would either cause problems later or just soak up your bandwidth. The first line is critical and assigns the root of the depot to the root of my workspace, like so. And normally this is all a workspace mapping looks like. But now we're going to add in some more lines. All the other lines take something away from that. They're like exclusions. So take this line for example. What's this saying? It's saying don't add any PDB files to the engine folder. And why not add PDB files? Well, because they're too big and largely serve no purpose. You only really need these files to help you determine the root cause of a crash, and if your engine is crashing, then that's obviously something you need to resolve as a programmer before you commit engine changes to Perforce. End users like artists should not be experiencing engine crashes and therefore won't require your local PDB files to help you diagnose it. We need to be better than that. We also need to prohibit any intermediate folders from entering source control. There are plenty of them scattered around the engine, but you don't want to be sharing them among Perforce users. Likewise, we should also specifically prevent obj folders from being uploaded, as they're only needed temporarily while compiling the engine. And likewise too, the saved folders. They always contain files local to your machine. For all of this, you need to edit your own workspace mappings accordingly here. Just be careful, check and double check them before committing. And good luck, we'll resume when you're done. So hit OK when you get there and then confirm no regarding the folder is not empty message, as we're about to use our local folder to fill the depot. Of course, it's not empty. And hit cancel if you end up in the add files wizard, as we need to be a lot more selective about adding files to the server than this wizard can help us with. Okay, so head left and we'll see we have two tabs, one showing the empty depot view on the server, and the other the local workspace view on your client. Let's select that workspace view now and see what we've got to look at adding to the depot. The first thing we're interested in here is the engine folder, and this is what we need to take our time with to get right. There are quite a few folders here that we need to add, and I think we'll start with the config folder, as I know that one is pretty small. We're going to add these folders one at a time, and the reason for this is just to break up the upload in case it ever fails, because trust me, certainly on a central server, it can fail if you don't have a perfect link. And if you have to keep resubmitting hundreds of thousands of files, you will go insane. So let's split them up into manageable chunks and submit them one at a time. A change list for the uninitiated is like a batch of work that you want to synchronize with the depot. The synchronization in this case being adding new files to the depot. We'll be creating a lot of change lists during this upload process, but have no fear, I'll be guiding you every step of the way. So, right click on the engine config folder and choose Mark for Add. Then select New to indicate which change list we want to use, and then give the change list a meaningful description. These descriptions are recorded historically to indicate what happened in each change list, so we need to make the description relevant. In our case though, it's very simple. Just state engine config folder and then hit OK. Now let's do the same with the content folder. And now the shaders folder. Okay, that's enough for the moment. Let's head over to the right and select the pending tab. This will show us a list of our pending change lists. A pending change list is one that we've created but not yet submitted to the server. It's only when we submit change lists that something meaningful happens with the server. Until then, it's all still local on your client. So here we can see the config change list just contains a whole bunch of ini files, as expected. And let's just quickly check the shaders change list. All good. I won't go into the content change list, it's quite large. Right, I think we can submit things now and get this show on the road. Let's right click on the config folder and choose submit. All is good, so let's hit submit and send it on its way. Gone. Now let's do the same with the content folder. This will take a while, but I'm going to fast forward to save time. In fact, I'll be doing that through quite a few of these change lists, so don't be startled if my upload speed is significantly faster than yours. Apparently, it's not. And now the shaders folder. Done. Okay, notice that all the pending change lists have disappeared because they're no longer pending, they're submitted. Okay, now let's add the program files folder. Let's check that. And yeah, we got a lot of log files here that we don't want to add. I seem to remember that happening before. So let's select those files. Use the normal Windows shift clicking to select a lot of files. Right click and choose Revert to remove them from a change list. Note that reverting files that we're adding here doesn't change anything locally on your client machine, it just removes them from the change list. We just don't want all these temporary files being added to the depot. Okay, so now we can submit that change list and hit submit. Now let's just head left and check to make sure all these things are appearing in a depot. So select the depot tab over there and there we are. Our folder's successfully submitted to the depot. And everything is as we'd expect. Perfect. So back to the workspace tab then. Let's add the documentation folder. And now the extras folder. Just continue when you get messages about files with wildcards in their names. Generally, these are extraneous files. Perforce doesn't like some of these characters that you can use on other operating systems, and it will complain about them from time to time. Right, let's try submit the documentation folder. Let's just quickly check the file list. Looks okay to me. Let's submit it. And now submit our extras folder. And now let's add the platforms folder. Right, the plugins folder next. And submit it and send it on its way. That's a lot of files. Same routine though. And now the binaries and build folders. The latter is always pretty small. Okay, we're heading into the big one, the source folder. We're going to submit the subfolders in there one at a time. The reason being they're pretty big, or at least the third party folder is normally very big. So let's get that one out of the way first. So same routine. Yeah, this is huge, this change list. And I'll fast forward my way through that again. Now we can add the developer folder. And now for the editor folder. and the Programs folder. And lastly, the Runtime folder. And now these last few struggling files in the source folder. So that's a whole source folder done. Getting close now. I can see some bright light shining at the end of the tunnel there. Okay, the whole engine folder is done. Shiny. Let's go back up a level and complete the root folders. First, the feature packs. Then samples. And then templates. On this whole venture, if you have folders there that I've not here, then please do add them, of course. Obviously, Unreal Engine evolves, and what I'm explaining to you now might not perfectly represent what you're seeing there if you're doing this with a future engine version. Just be aware there are some folders that you don't need to add there and shouldn't. And these are the .vs, derived data cache, and intermediate. We've already excluded a few others using your workspace mappings. And now for the last few files in the root folder. I won't add the SLN file as that's generated automatically, and also the setup files. I don't want other people running those by accident, so I'll keep them to myself. So there, everything is added and we're finally back in clear daylight. We're almost over the finish line, but we've just a bit of confirmation checking to do and then we'll call it done. Now we're going to use the Find File option on the Depot Engine folder. And what we're going to do here is look for anything ending with .dll. So indicate that and hit Find. It'll take a while to populate, but ensure your list is sorted by file type. We just need to ensure that they're all set to +SW. Which they apparently are. Now let's look for .exe files and check for +SWX. And they all are. And now .config files, these should be set to +W. And indeed they're good. The other related file types should also be good then. Right, one last one. Any files that start with Unreal Build Tool, these need to be writable too. And now the build graph.automation files. Good, all done. Remember, all these file type settings were set up on our server earlier when we edited the type mappings. This is what it was all about, so we didn't have to do all of this by hand, which can be very error prone. Using the type mappings, much simpler. And what we've just been doing here is checking to see if the server got it right, and indeed it has. Let's just check any pending change list to make sure we've missed nothing. Ah, we did. That's very odd. Looks like some files from one of the change lists got dumped to the default change list for some reason. Yeah, they're all from the source editor folder. But no worries, let's just submit them now. And that, my friend, finally, is that. So let's close Perforce and get a command prompt into our Unreal Engine folder. Then run generate_project_files.bat and see if it complains about anything. We're good. Excellent. Load up Visual Studio. And open our UE4 solution. Let's just try to build the solution again. Ah, so we have an issue here. It looks like .exp files, at least in the engine binaries folder, need to be writable. I can't ever remember that being the case before, but I am getting old, so maybe I just forgot. So let's just wait and see what else occurs. Okay, I fast forwarded through that. and several EXP files appear to be at fault. So let's go into People-V and manually set the type to writable for these files. As explained before, this is normally done by the type mappings, but that ship has sailed now and we need to fix this by hand at this point because they're already submitted. This is actually good experience though, as I'm sure as the engine evolves, you'll come across issues like this yourself when working with newer versions of the engine, and you'll need to know how to address it after the fact like this. So we've done a search for those .exp files. We're going to select the files. We're specifically interested in the ones in the engine binaries folder. Right click, change file type, and set the writable state. Then confirm. Easy. And now submit that change list. And let's compile again. Okay, no problems this time. I'm not entirely sure it's built what it didn't last time though. But at least it's not complaining and we know we've fixed the issue it was having beforehand. So next time it really does try to rebuild those problematic programs, it should be fine. So let's quickly run the editor and make sure that's okay too. And all is well with the world and everything in it. I'm just going to quickly modify the type map so this doesn't happen again in the future, and feel free to edit along with me. We just need to add a line for these .exp files. Let's just double check the folder name they're in, as there seems to be different types of .exp files around the depot, but we're only interested in the binaries folder, I think. And we need to check whether these particular exp files are binary or text content. Right, binary. Okay, so that's the line you need. Save and exit. And the command prompt has confirmed the changes. Right, I would say that's a job very well done. Time for a beer, I think, before we really get started on this course. And now we're just about ready to get our feet wet. And when we come back, things are going to start getting unreal.